so far, and I can't wait for the final. But before with that, we do have our second semi-final to go, and it is going to be RDU, of course, versus Seiko. The Priest bans across the board, and shock, horror, subtle. We are back to Warrior, Druid, Mage. Although there are some differences in these builds, with RDU having that Malygos Druid, for instance, that we talked about at the start of the day.
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I do think the Mali Druid is well positioned here for RDU. You know, I have had a few bad things to say about the Mali Druid overall, but because Seiko's gone in a direction where he's brought kind of mid-rangey and control-y decks, and then chosen to steer them further towards anti-aggro by including Dr. Broom to rush out minions to be able to contest board states from other people. I think maybe that might leave a little bit of a gap for RDU's anti-control lineup to really like blast through and just have more power to get over the top. It'll probably be the Tempo Mage that will be the most difficult for RDU to get a win with, if any of them, as long as his Bomb Warrior comes together, because I do think there's a bit of an inherent failure rate in his build of Bomb Warrior as well. But yeah, my prediction at the start of the day was a Blyze versus RDU final, and I see no reason to change that now.
Right. And honestly here, talking about this anti-control or anti-slow lineup that RDU has brought, just to outline that, it's not only the Malygos Druid, but you know, I believe at least that the Turbo Bomb Warrior is a little bit better to just, you know, shuffle so many bombs into the deck that it is going to get the job done, as it is lacking on some of the other removal tools. You have to make cuts to be able to play 2-cutting class, for example, as well as these upgrades. So I do think there is, as you pointed out, just that Mage is the one that just isn't really teched for anti-anything. It's just a Mage deck, right? Like everyone's, though, to be fair. It is just the rough, at least starting shell of what that Tempo Mage is. So yeah, I do agree. I think Mage is going to be the one that might cause trouble for both players, but we'll see very shortly as we are about to get into our game number one. But I'm excited to see how Seiko's builds do pay off as well, because you mentioned that, you know, Dr. Broom or Animated Broomstick, for those who aren't quite up to date on the silly names that are coming up for these cards. Although I completely get, like, it is an anti-aggro card, gives you minions rush that can then trade into you know, opponent's board. It's also can still be good against other things, right? It is not a hard anti-aggro tech. I think the card is just good, and it happens to help in the builds that Seiko has against some aggro too. So it isn't like Seiko's just all in on an anti-aggro lineup and he's against an anti-control lineup and he's going to lose. There's still going to be a lot to play for, especially when we know Seiko definitely has his own style to things. But once again, we are going to see the Priests banned out. So these players at least agree that Priest is just the nightmare, which honestly, so might be a surprise when you see players having decks like Bomb Warrior and Malygos Druid, decks that, at least I believe historically, you know, big sort of combo, high, slow damage decks should be good versus Priest, but they seemingly just aren't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, like, this clearly was some degree of the design intention. Like, it has to be. It's really, really surface level analysis. But, you know, you describe a dynamic about how Priest has generally struggled to stop infinite win conditions, you know, ultimate late game combo decks. So they've been given a card to try and solve that problem. I think the issue is that it solves that problem a little bit too freaking well. Mindrender Alusha is just a ridiculously powerful card, you know, an effect comparable to Heist Baron Togwaggle, an 8-drop, and Azalina Soul Thief, a 7-drop, and it costs 2. Like, that seems like it might be overtuned just a touch. So now the dynamic with one card is just instantly flipped on its head, and you know, combo decks just fear Priest at this point, which is a really weird world to be living in.
And I think that the power of the card obviously comes from its mana cost, right? You know, as you mentioned, 2 mana. It's so cheap that you can just work it in. People are saying, "Do you play it? When do you play it on curve? Never mind when you play it late game against combo decks." But for me as well, it doesn't require any setup or combo in itself, right? Because even you look at Togwaggle, for example, normally it was Togwaggle into something. You know, we remember the naturalized days and stuff. So there were setups required for some of these big, crazy combo, you know, swap decks with your opponent or hands or things like that. Whereas this is just one card in your deck that is very flexible and just breaks combo decks. So very, very huge. I do agree. I think that might just be the one card, because if RDU's rocking Mali Druid against Seiko's Priest, he has the Mali or something cheap in hand and some Moonfires, and Seiko just plays Mind Render, then but there it goes, right? The game becomes infinitely more hard for RDU to take a win with after that turn.
And RDU getting his chew on here, clearly eating his spoils from his most recent cooking stream on the G2 channel. That's it's not true. It's just a plug. His cooking streams are great. You should watch them.
All I know is the one about how to make a salad and just opened a bag of salad. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I don't know whether to be angry or impressed, because that's the sort of thing I would do as well.
It was great. He was making steak salad. He's like, right, so step one, we're going to make the salad, then I'm going to cook the steak. So this is how I make salad. I just go and I get a bag of salad, and then I open it. Like, literally, my tweet did not misrepresent the situation at all. It was fantastic.
Okay, well, we are going to get into this game now. RDU on the top. On that Mage, it is going to be going up against the Druid, and this is a matchup I am quite excited for, because I just still can't really get to grips with how it's like supposed to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a good point. The stats provided to us by Lorinda do show that most builds of Druid, or Druid as a whole, is slightly favored against Mage so far in Grandmasters overall, which, again, has not necessarily been my ladder experience. I've been performing extremely good against Druid on ladder overall, but it seems like at the high levels, the Grandmasters are finding a small edge, generally 55-ish% with most builds, and there are a few variations of builds going up against Mage, so it has seemed like a decent one for the Druid up until this point, and I do think that Mount Seller builds should do pretty reasonably on the whole.
I think we've seen some experimentation with how the Mage plays against Druid as well, and I think the players are definitely still working that out, whether there is the sort of minion tempo plays style or the zoo style as we saw yesterday, or whether you do try and hold off and then go for a crazy crazy pop off there.
Someday I'll be just like you.
RDU wasting zero time here. All the way in with this Sorcerer's Apprentice already.
I feel like I'm also mandated to say Malagos now, just because it's there, and I talked about it yesterday. But no, I'm not going to go for it. Going to go for the Elemental there, which is going to be the much stronger on-curve play. But again, we mentioned this solo, but Mage is doable to beat back this kind of super early Guardian animals, especially when RDU knows he gets pretty much 2 turns in a row this game.
Not the greatest of choices. I think it is likely to just be Azure Explorer. No, he's going to stick with the Dalaran Mage, perhaps just choosing to tempo it out this turn, since he has nothing he particularly wants to spend the 1 mana on here. The rest of his hand costs 0, and Ancient Mysteries does nothing, and he doesn't currently have a payoff in hand for just, spending 1 mana on a spell.
It does mean he isn't able to play the Elemental, the Steward, next turn, though. So it does mean that next turn is looking a little bit dry, which is why I thought he was going to go for the Azure, because it just gives him a curve, whereas now it is this Frost Nova and a Dream currently, and that might not be enough.
The curve options were pretty interesting for Seiko as well, right? Which we didn't really talk about because we were still kind of in a setup phase of the matchup.
Yeah.
Where he chose to explode all the way into Guardian Animals, have this turn as a complete whiff, and then say curve into Overgrowth from there. Which I do like the look of. Like, I didn't really have time to assess the various ways he could play it. Like, obviously, blooming out the Overgrowth was one, and then having 1 turn off, and then going Guardian Animals into Ysera back-to-back, potentially with certain draws. He had a lot of ways to do that, but actually looking at this one play out, it seems to work pretty well for him, because his 1 turn off, he basically just kept hold of initiative, right? And he's not really fallen behind from essentially doing nothing for 2 turns. 1 turn completely overloaded, 1 turn playing Overgrowth and passing. He's not really fallen behind on board for it, so it's worked out pretty well for Seiko so far.
Right, and I think we saw this yesterday as well in one of the matches where it was a similar opening, and the idea that, well, you can just guardian animals super early and then still kind of just play like a normal overgrowth curve, right? If you overgrowth on 4 into the rest of your game, apart from you got to guardian animals on 2 or whatever it was. So I think, I would have naturally avoided that kind of play if I was just left to my own devices, just playing ladder or whatever. But I think the more I see these players go for that when the option's there, the more I like it, because the payoff is, well, what if your opponent just can't deal with it at all? And then you just run away with the game anyway.
Right. Seiko, a little bit unhappy to see the Raz coming down, I'm sure. But not the end of the world, as he can just keep developing past this pretty hard. But now RDU has the opportunity. And with that Mana Giant draw, okay, I was going to say he had a crucial game-defining decision this turn. Does he all in the Prime this turn, try and push right now before the Dragons have an impact? Or does he wait, play a little bit slower, and then potentially use... Okay! Lethal question mark? Okay, no, I'll finish my thought. So...
close!
Or hold back and react to the situation by maybe trying to Solarian Prime some Dragons. The fact that he drew the Mana Giant, so he was able to push this hard into the board by an additional 0-cost 8/8, I think absolutely made the decision very, very simple for him. He just slams the Prime.
Absolutely huge there. One of the best primes we've seen all weekend. That did everything right. You could argue some of the ordering, but most importantly, the Ysera was dealt with. An insane amount of damage that was done to Seiko, and as you mentioned, the Giant was actually just the cherry on top, wasn't it? To be able to say, well, actually, enjoy your board now. But I will say, even though it looked rough for Seiko, if he gets Dragons from these portals, he has the Broom, so he can rush them and maybe make some trades and make him safe. It's not likely, but it's possible. But not anymore.
Nope.
Sands of time run low.
But again, although this has looked very one-sided, it does show the potential of having just the Broom in your deck, right? There are ways that you can come back and make trades that you shouldn't be able to, but regardless, RDU is going to take game number 1 with the Mage, and we said at the start of this series, we think the Mage might be the one that is the struggling deck to grab a win with, and RDU starts the series off by getting that win. So now, your predictions may well come through so far.
Yeah, and I think that Broom dynamic that you were talking about is so key to the way that Seiko played that game, because he felt comfortable just spending resources to play Force of Nature in a situation where he knew Raz was a complete blowout. But he was sat there thinking, okay, even if Raz is a blowout, I play my Sarah, I still have plenty of health to play with, and then on the following turn I draw a bunch of cards, get maybe 2 or 3 Dragons out of my deck, and then pretty much no matter how big that board gets, I can Broom alongside that and just rush out those Dragons and take back board control and be in control of the game. A little bit of healing from Overflow along the way to help me out, should be fine. What he wasn't accounting for was the absolute uber nuts Prime coming down alongside that. Pyroblast just cutting down his timer completely, was only, 2 damage off lethal in the end, and with the spell damage Raz coming through as well, and then just really not hitting the Dragons off the draws either, just didn't really have the time that he thought he had in the matchup. But certainly I think the Broom and the security that he felt like that was giving him was very key to the way he was choosing to play the matchup.
It really was. Prime being pulling it out the bag there for RDU, and that means he's going to go in this series 1-0 so far. But we are going to take a quick break while we set up our next game, and we will find out if Saul's prediction is going to be correct for a Blythe versus RDU final. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back to continue our day of Hearthstone Grandmasters.
After. I mean, I'm so bad at this.
I am weird and I have talents, but that doesn't combine the weird talents thing maybe enough.
I don't have any weird or random talents, that's why I'm playing Hearthstone.
I used to be able to do a backflip. Nope, nothing.
Like, can you move your eyebrows in a weird way, or wiggle your ears without moving the rest of your face, or do a handstand?
Nope.
Splits?
Yes, completely trash.
I think the only talents I have are probably like mathematics, physics stuff, and playing Hearthstone. So,
Can you do quick math in your head?
yes.
117 times 42.
$874.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't check if it was right.
Wait, that's not right. Couldn't you have asked me this yesterday? It would have been a lot easier.
We are going to continue our series versus Seiko with Seiko versus RDU. There we go. As RDU currently taking that game with Mage in a pretty explosive fashion off the back of that prime, but he's still got a long way to go, and Seiko is by no means a pushover. So excited to see this one continue, but it does mean Seiko, I would say, has got a bit more of an uphill climb, just based on what RDU's lineup left over is.
Yeah, we were mentioning just before the break how Mage was probably the deck that lined up just okay against Seiko's lineup, whereas the other two decks probably line up a little bit better. I do still have some questions over Bomb Warrior matchups overall. That is probably the deck that the deck that has the highest ratio of being common in Grandmasters versus my comfort level with it, or at least those two are inverse, where I really haven't had that much time with it, but it's a really, really common bring to the tournament. So my level of certainty on matchups with that deck is not what it will be, hopefully, later on in later weeks. But certainly I think RDU's Mali Druid is pretty well positioned in the series overall.
Well, we are going to see RDU on the Warrior for that next game. Going to be on Seiko with that Druid as well. And RDU, no surprise whatsoever. If you are going to play this sort of Turbo Bomb Warrior, you may as well keep that Wrench Caliber in your opening hand, because that is pretty much the card that unlocks the whole deck.
Yeah, it's like the stylish triple S in the Rogue deck, the Self-Sharpening Sword. Without that weapon available to you, there's an awful lot of your deck that just straight up doesn't work. You know, you're going to draw your Krastenov, you're going to draw your Cutting Class. You have absolutely nothing to do with it. It's not even like we've seen Tyler on multiple occasions draw kind of the wrong half of his Weapon Rogue deck and just have to go off on just a regular Rogue Dagger. You don't even have that luxury available to you when you're playing Warrior. You absolutely have to hit one of the weapons to make this deck work.
How dare you? Are you saying RDU cannot pop off with an upgrade?
All right, yeah, no, fair point, fair point, fair point.
Upgrade, 1/3 weapon, let's go.
Yeah.
Not quite as many weapon buffs in the Warrior deck as there are in the Rogue, but that is just a very early bomb here, and RDU pushing Seiko down to 22 health this early in the game. Seiko, though,
You just hit him for 8 that turn. That's insane.
a good weapon.
Yeah.
I didn't mention too much, though, but Seiko got hold of a second wild growth from his studies, which meant he just has access to all the ramp in the world. And you see Nourish there, not quite what it used to be.
How curious.
And in the old days when we have an overgrowth now, but is it worth it just for the card draw at this point, Sol?
It might be, yeah. It's kind of the issue with Seiko's hand is he's got all of the mana in the world and just nothing to do with it right now. So I think it does just end up being a Nourish.
I'm going to cast it this turn, though. Wants the Thresher down instead. Wants to have something on board, so RDU doesn't get to just keep smacking him in the face.
This looks like Kablam to the face and fresh weapon to me. I could hear the arguments to just Bladestorm this minion away and be done with it, but I want to curve this Dr. Krastenov on a fresh weapon next turn.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. And because there's Barov, right? I think that's what pushes me into this play to agree with you, is that the Barov is, no matter what worst case scenario he has, not next turn but the turn after, the Barov Bladestorm, if it's a true desperation play to clear a board. So there is the safety net for RDU, which means, you know, I am on board with this deal. Some more damage, get more bombs in there, sell this Krastenov for a nice trade. Ugh. Oh, okay.
There it is.
So it goes back in the game. Honestly, what must newer viewers think when we talk about some of these cards? They're like, oh yeah, going to be playing the Dr. Broom list, and everyone's like, wait, Boom in Druid? What's going on? And now we're saying Dr. 1. That is an old meme, and it just keeps on coming back.
Yep. Deal with it.
Just do it. We're here for weeks.
Yep.
No shield block to go with the shield slam quite yet, and no naturally built up armor is a little bit frustrating for RDU. Now with this board, do you think it's Dr. Krastenov just shook it in anyway and kind of sacrifice it?
I don't see any issue with this, yeah. I don't think like every single point of damage has to go face. I think it's just a pretty reasonable clear in that spot. Get the value out of the weapon. Seems good.
Wow, and this can... the mana is there, or the mana generation is there to get this Lake Thresher out too. Yeah, this turn, even though there's no good target for a Bug Beam.
Yeah.
So many
This turn would be so nutty if there was like actually things to hit on the other side of the board.
Right. Oh my god. This is the problem. How far does Seiko go? Because if he goes all the way with no card draw in hand,
yeah,
and then just Barov Bladestorm comes down, is that just a GG at that point? Because what would he have to draw? Like exactly Overflow off the top, or a Guardian Animals for the Twilight Runners, I suppose.
Wow. Is it Barrel of Blade, or would you just Shield Slam it instead? Which is the better resource to have in hand after the fact? I think I'd rather have the Blade Storm.
I think I'd rather have the Shield Slam. Mainly because he still has his armor generation anyway. He's getting hold of the board now, and a Shield Slam is able to say like just snipe another Mount Seller, right? Whereas a Blade Storm definitely does not achieve that. And whoa, Seiko does get the Overflow off the top though, so he is not looking great, but not out yet.
So I take your argument, but I'll present the contrary, which is your opponent's out of cards, clearly struggling for card draw right now. What if they just draw a Twilight Runner? And then you have a Blade Storm in your hand to be able to deny that card draw from them just playing it out with stealth.
Very true, but if that is the whole turn, is just whack face and let them draw the bombs a good plan?
Yeah, fair.
I'm half joking, but half not with that answer,
I think it's a fair
honestly.
point. I think it is a fair point.
And this upgrade again, you see the differences. Although they don't look crazy between this Turbo Warrior and the other form of Bomb Warrior we've been seeing, but this upgrade just adds so much extra damage.
Yeah.
And you really do just very quickly see the payoff of why you keep Wrench Caliber in your opening hand. RDU has swung, what, like close to every turn of this game it feels so far that he could possibly swing, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Someone's got to lead the charge.
Oh, Deathwing comes into the hand on curve for next turn as well now, which means that RDU is not only going to be representing masses of weapon damage and masses of bomb damage, he's now actually got the big minion presence potentially to back all this up.
Nature speaks through us.
Hydra into Guardian Animals is going to help Seiko, and like we said, before he drew that Overflow, Seiko was pretty much just dead at that point. So considering the dire position he was in, he's doing okay now, but that is 2 bombs at least.
Oh, so disgusting. This is still a pretty clean Deathwing though, going back the other way. Can't go too badly wrong. Is there a better option though?
Not quite, yeah, I would say. Although this Zephyrus in hand, the 17 cards left for RDU, so it's probably not super close to active right now. But as soon as it does, that also opens up a ton of options, whether that's a potential Mass Dispel, just a direct damage burst spell to end the game, even heal if required, but probably not. But even just that Zephyrus sitting there means that RDU, although has played and sort of gone very aggressive in the game, if he needs to fall back and be a bit defensive, he can, because he knows that Zephyrus is only getting closer and closer to being live.
That's right, yeah. There are only 9 cards remaining in Seiko's deck right now, so the bomb lethals are pretty common. Are you choosing to push here? Wow. Maximum tempo. Leaving up an 8-attack Wind Fury minion on the board.
But
he is just trying to end this game right here and now.
Let's remember though, Seiko does not play Survival of the Fittest, so there isn't a survival lethal which has allowed RDU to even consider this play.
Right.
Creatures.
And Seiko needs to put a lot of health on this board, which he is doing, of course. But these bombs, no matter how much health is on the board, RDU at the moment only needs 6 to go face.
And there's a lot of damage in the deck right now. He doesn't even need all of that damage. And he still has a pretty effective looking Deathwing in his hand.
Seiko even attack with this runner? He can't, right?
Probably not.
He's on 9 cards.
Sands of time run low.
Oh!
Okay, okay. His hand's green. His hand's green.
What?
He's still alive. He's at 1. No need to panic. It's still good.
dodge a wrench, you can dodge a bomb. Is that going to happen at this point? Because Seiko's going to have to. No! It's going to be game. RDU takes game number 2 with that Turbo Bomb Warrior, and it's looking very, very good. And so you might be having the finals you wanted, or predicted at least, on your hands very, very soon. But honestly, let's just take a quick talk about that, because the way RDU played that was very aggressive. Like, as you said, just leaving the high-powered Ghidra on board. Are you a fan of that? Obviously, it paid off for him in this single game of Hearthstone, but do you like the approach in general? Because he did have some defensive plays, like the Deathwing.
I honestly don't know. And I know that, you know, when you say I don't know about that turn or whatever, people interpret that as a negative, but I mean it earnestly. Like, I don't know. It's not a line that I really looked at. I thought the Deathwing was reasonable in that spot, just to be able to clear up some of the board and contest and buy some time. I'd love to hear some other opinions on that turn, because it wasn't even really a line that I really looked at and fully examined. But obviously, like, we saw the chaos it then caused for Seiko's turn. Just extra bombs in the deck, extra damage being pushed, and all of those boom bots on board certainly gave Seiko a much, much more difficult turn than just dropping the Deathwing did. So certainly just like looking at how it panned out, it looked like RDU made the right play, but I really didn't put a lot of consideration into that line.
Yeah, pretty crazy game on the scene. It does look like we're going to be moving on to the Druid mirror. Seiko locking in that Druid once again with that exotic Mount Seller build. But again, just the key point, one animated broomstick in there for Seiko, of course. But no survival of the fittest, no Malygos. It really is just this Mount Seller. And I think on the beginning, we were praising the list because it can go that little bit faster. It's a little bit better versus a lot of the aggressive decks. Probably a better versus Mage in general, I would say. But versus the Malygos Druid, maybe it is fast enough to get the win, right? Maybe RDU just won't quite have the time to not necessarily full Mali OTK, but to just get to that late game power plays, because there are a lot of high impact minions that RDU has to get to and then have the mana for to be able to chain together. And without Geppetto, that could be a bit tough. But look at these opening hands. Who you like in here, Sultan?
Pretty even looking on both sides. Okay, one of them just gained a significant advantage in my eyes. Temporary mana is one thing. RDU has plenty of that, but permanent mana, much more important, I think, in Druid Mirrors. And Seiko has access to much, much more. And yeah, this curve certainly looks a little clearer to me, because he ramps up here with the overgrowth, means next turn that the overload will mean that he has a clean turn and can then curve into the guardian animals from there. Like, this is a fairly clear curve to play, because this just curves nicely into the wild growth, and now boom, guardian animals on curve next turn, with permanent mana available to him, as I mentioned.
Yeah. One thing. Oh, okay. RDU cut me off, because the point I was about to raise is kind of pointless, but okay, it's kind of just backwards now then. I was going to say, Seiko getting guardian animals first isn't necessarily the best thing, because RDU could, or did, have the mana to guardian animals back. Whereas now we're seeing the downside of that, where Seiko got to guardian animals second, even though he had the ramp first, which means he can do these trades first with the rush. And that's why I was a little bit surprised, and why I was caught off guard that RDU started that turn so quickly. I thought he was just going to wait to see if he needed to guardian animals in response.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that too. I've talked about this dynamic a lot, where, you know, if your opponent does get Lake Thresher after you go guardian animals first and just drop it on an empty board, it's kind of punishing. And I don't think that's a rule that you should live by. Like, if you have 7 mana, as Seiko does, and you have guardian animals in your hand and you have no other play, yeah, do it. Spend your mana, play your biggest things. But RDU, like, overloaded himself into that play. He overloaded himself into a play that had potential huge downside, and then has to take a punish for it the next turn as well. So yeah, potentially he could have offset that a little bit by just taking a slower turn and then reacting to Seiko's board, be it Mount Seller or Guardian Animals on that turn with some rushing beasts of his own. And then his slow turn that he receives from the overload the turn afterwards would have been a little bit more mitigated by the fact that he already had some removal with his Guardian Animals turn.
Oh wow, now Seiko maybe not going for the Mount Scylla turn, but really just having this Ysera and now the overflow to back it up with is absolutely huge. But on the other side of the board, RDU does have that Lightning Bloom into Geppetto. Now, Ysera and Mali in hand. That means he might get some 1-mana beasts, so I don't even know what the correct order would be here. I guess it would actually be this, right? Attack in, see what you draw first, because he might not want to Lightning Bloom at all now with this hand.
Yeah, absolutely. He does. I like him leaving himself the potential to just bloom Malygos straight up here, because Malygos can just end up winning as a straight up tempo play. Like, if you can just go Bloom, Mali, Moonfire, Bog Beam or something, just to create a big tempo swing, that can end up being pretty game winning in the Druid mirror. And lo and behold, RDU does have access to that, but just Seiko's makeup of minions on board doesn't really allow that to be a suitable tempo swing.
Also as well, although it's a good point being able to play the Mali, against Seiko does run the Broom, which means although the minions might not be on board already, which they are now, there's always a chance that Seiko can generate a board and then just Broom them into Mali anyway, so there is just that extra level of fear factor, and that doesn't mean RDU shouldn't do it, it just means there's more chance that Seiko can punish it. Oh well. Nature Study is going to be a great kickoff point. Gift?
Gift of the Wild looks pretty poppin', yeah.
Is there any reason to Soul of the Forest instead? Probably not, right? You take those 2 sort of worth of damage now, you make the minions harder to kill anyway, and the minions probably weren't that likely to die regardless. I guess swipes are the question, but he's going to kill the Malygos, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, is he going to kill the Malygos?
He's absolutely going to kill the Malygos, yes. The fact that he gets to Crystal Power up at the end of this turn, I think, is the clincher, because the only thing that was putting me off Gift as the pick there is there's the swipe punish for Raven's moment of greed of wanting to go face. The only thing that was putting me off the Gift that turn is that it felt like it could have been overflow turn anyway, because you did have one value trade on the Mali on board already. So if you could find some way to clear it up and make an overflow turn that drew a bunch of dragons, that seemed really powerful. But the fact he had Crystal Power anyway, Gift of the Wild was kind of achieving what his overflow was anyway, which was making massive minions and then healing up those massive minions after the value trade on the Mali so they couldn't be removed from the other Druid side. So yeah, overall, I think that was a very clean game from Seiko, but you have to rewind all the way back to RDU's sequencing, I guess, with Guardian Animals, but I think the discrepancy between the quality of the two hands was as such that I don't think any decision RDU made really had that big of an impact, because Seiko just had all of the permanent ramp and RDU drew none of it and drew every expensive card in his deck. But that's Mali Druid for you, right? Like, if you don't draw the ramp, your deck sucks.
Even further, though, which is something I'll admit we didn't touch on at the time before RDU sent us a tweet. He isn't playing Thresher in his list because it just doesn't fit in Malygos Druid, which means, although yes, the base minions can respond well to the Guardian Animals anyway. Your minions still have Rush. You could have got Twilight Runner to kill a Teacher's Pet and so on. Thresher is the best one to Guardian Animals into a Guardian Animals because of the cleave. And RDU doesn't run any because he is playing this Malygos list. So that, the Guardian Animals second always being the best doesn't always ring true, purely based on the fact of whether you run Threshers or not as well. So not like a strict big error or anything, but definitely a point in the game that things could have changed if he went around it a little bit of a different way. But he is still leading this series 2-1. Seiko still got a lot of work to do as RDU gets to lock in this Mali Druid once again.
But I do think as a general point, it's something that people need to look at, where maybe Lightning Bloom is being overvalued a little bit. Because there was this discussion on the APAC broadcast earlier today as well, where Gia was advocating for it, saying that in the Mulligan it's usually very high up in the win rates if you look at stats, and that is true. It's usually around 4th or 5th in a lot of matchups. But if you look at the discrepancy between 4th and 5th and 1st and 2nd, which are Overgrowth and Guardian Animals in the vast majority of matchups, in some matchups, it's 10% that those cards are better than all of the other ones. So I think, Lightning Bloom perhaps being overkept, overplayed, is something that might need to be looked at when the discrepancy is that big in win rate, that and the actual best cards in the deck. Maybe it's something that can be examined moving forward.
As we said, there's a lot to learn still in this expansion. You think you've seen stuff, you've seen nothing yet, I can promise you that. But for now, Seiko is going to be on that Mage and get off to a start we see Mage get off to often, which somehow is just the Solarian coming down on 2 happens. Maybe it's being tainted by the studies, right? Of just like studies into Solarian is also quite common, so it's almost like you run 3 in your deck at least. But I feel like this opening happens an absurd amount of time for Mage. Are you a Spider Tank gamer, sort of? I believe you are after this weekend.
I'm still not so... some matchups, yes, absolutely. Others, not so much. Particularly this one, like Firebrand, can be such a stomping if your opponent just needs to tempo out a Twilight Runner if they have that kind of hand. Or even as a response to Guardian Animals, it can still be very effective. But I feel like if you have other powerful plays, you can get yourself diverted away from Firebrand quite quickly, which I think Seiko has found himself doing here, right? He bet on the fact he could find himself a playable some other way than just tempoing out Firebrand. And personally, in this matchup, I think I support that.
Yep, we are going to see RDU test for the counterspell. Oh! Ooh! Well, that's all right. That's not a bad one at all. And I was just about to say, the benefit here for Seiko is, with that Netherwing portal, you would expect your opponent to overgrowth this turn, in the worst case scenario, I guess, and you gain a minion for it. So that Netherwing portal was, as you pointed out, instead of a Firebrand, the portal was actually just perfectly timed because there's a really nice payoff for it, and it made RDU also utilize that Innovate just to test if it was counterspell or not.
Yeah, now off this kind of partitioning of threats, Seiko gets to gain so much more tempo over the course of 2 turns than he would have done by playing this the other way around. This is a huge potential. Well, okay. Ended up a little bit inefficient, the way that the missiles ended up. We've seen multiple occasions where all missiles have gone face where they've been required to hit minions, but actually Seiko did not want too many of them hitting a minion there, and they pretty much all went to the minion.
And how did you like the value trade there instead of just putting a Solarian in?
I think I still do, yeah. I think it's worth the risk. Against this hand, which is just pure removal, it does look a bit silly. But I think with Tempo Mage, there's a lot of playing to outs in your deck, and I think maintaining maximum spell damage on board there is huge for Cram Session top deck, it's huge for Raz top deck, and we're not at the stage of the game where Seiko's really that interested in drawing a Prime just yet, so there's no super great upside of shuffling that into his deck quicker. So yeah, I think overall, I agree with the way that he made the trades. It just so happened that RDU had a hand that was a punish and made it look a little bit silly.
Yep. Definitely made it more killable for the Guardian Animals as well, right? Because the minion would have been sort of outside the range of those. We are going to see I would say a forced evocation this turn. I don't think this was the turn that Seiko really wanted to play evocation, but kind of the turn he had to. But Learn Draconic, definitely not a bad starter. And Incantus as well. Not only going to help towards that Learn Draconic, but also help out towards the rest of the game plan. It's like he just played a Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Dynamic. It's such a weird dynamic, right? This is something that pure Spell Mage, which is a kind of a weird tier 3-ish deck before this expansion rolled around, actually plays both of these cards, Learn Draconic and Incanter's Flow, and they have bizarre anti-synergy with each other because a lot of the time you want to be spending mana on spells. You see it in this deck when you Sorcerer's Apprentice Evocation pop off and you get given a Learn Draconic, but you literally can't spend enough mana on spells to actually activate the dragon on the same turn because everything's so cheap from your Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's kind of first world problem-y, but I thought I'd bring it up.
Oh. Now, is this just going to be a setup here? Sorcerer's Apprentice. Does he want to... The Learn Draconic is only on 2, is it?
It is on 2 currently, yeah. No, 3, sorry, right now. Because he played Ray of Frost. He played Incanter's Flow Ray of Frost.
So he could actually play Ray of Frost to proc it, and then Sorcerer's Apprentice for just a final push.
Wait. It's on 3? He has one Twin Spell Ray of Frost and one singular Ray of Frost in his hand. So he goes 4, 5, 6, 7. He's one short.
Oh, sorry. Yep, he's one shot. Apologies. It is funny though, as you can see, the apprentice not being used before playing the spells because he wants to get to that Learned Draconic, as you pointed out.
He just actively wants to spend mana on spells. It's just bizarre anti-synergy sometimes.
We are going to see the Germination. A card I still can't decide whether I even like in the deck because of situations where it is just 4 mana. Sometimes you don't have a good target. Sometimes it just, if you think if this was any other good Druid card, the game looks way better. It is sticking around, but as we mentioned, these are the initial builds. But Seiko about to go for this cram session, and One Thief is going to help quite dramatically, potentially get him towards ending this game very, very soon indeed.
No damage off the One Thief, though. He only needed 3 damage. He has a ping and 1 spell damage available, plus all of the damage he has on board right now. Do you sack your Sorcerer's Apprentice to get a 6/6 this turn?
I think you do.
Is that the play? Can that be the line?
Probably not, because you go face for 3, whereas you wouldn't, right? And then that, really you're gaining potentially 3 damage, and it's only potentially, right?
Right.
So yeah, even though I said yes, you do, you definitely just don't. It's just me getting excited. Evolving Missiles, though, can help Seiko get through this taunt, potentially. We've seen Devolving Missiles not play very nice a lot of the time and miss the target that the player actually wants. So, by no means guaranteed.
Yeah, and even then, Seiko is short on damage right now. One Thief can help that with that problem.
So does he actually... He could start Ray of Frost, One Thief, right? That's job 1.
Ray of Frost the 4/12, play the One Thief, ping the... Yeah, I do think you end up pinging the 5/1, but I don't think you need to commit to that yet.
Agreed. That's exactly where my mind went. I went, okay, ping the 5/1. Wait, can we just get a spell to win the game first anyway? And then you can take a view, right? Because you can always ping afterwards.
Like, even here, like Arcane Explosion is something that you now have an option for where you don't ever need to ping the 5/1, right? So there's a lot of branching decision paths that you have to go down before you get to that ping decision.
Do you like things that come in boxes, Sol? Because is this just too slow, I guess? It's 2 turns away? Arcane Explosion does do a decent job on this board. Everything to face. He still retains the Devolving Missiles for next turn.
Yep. Love it.
But now, RDU has the mana for Germination, which means he can actually make a 4/12 taunt.
He can, but I think that exact consideration is what Seiko chose to hold on to the Devolving Missiles for that turn, right? Because it looks a little strange to take Polymorph there over two spells that kind of look superior for different reasons. Arcane Explosion was kind of more tempo immediately because it cleared up so much of the board and also would have allowed Seiko to potentially ping face instead of having to ping a minion for an extra damage. Puzzle Box is, theoretically in 2 turns can win the game if Seiko hadn't got there yet at that point. But I think the Polymorph was chosen and the Devolving Missiles was held for the exact reason of things like Germination coming down over the next couple of turns. There it is. So now, Devolving Missiles dead center is going to be
not
lethal
into a
here.
taunt.
True. That is a worthwhile caveat, yes.
Because again, from 9 to 8, if just 1 hits, there are some very solid 8 drops as well. I think the 7 drop slot has some decent taunts in it too.
What makes something real?
There are 9 taunts at 7 out of 43. So yeah, actually pretty common as well. Oh! Get out! Just get out! That's just a concede.
Yep, from what we've seen so far today, RDU now needs to emote Seiko and he wins the game.
What?
Time runs out
And-
on me.
In hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, of course, is there a world in which Seiko should have gone the other way, went for the devolving missiles and kept the polymorph?
Yeah, possibly.
RDU shakes it. Oh, I can't believe he throws my walking fountain. It's like, oh, so lucky.
But in all seriousness, like, Seiko is not done yet this game. Like, it looks like an insurmountable outcome. But firstly, he got an Earth Elemental off his Jandis, which certainly helps a lot. Secondly, RDU has to keep hero powering now just to be out of range of ping. And thirdly, he needs to clear the board because Seiko is going to be able to power through this taunt and push damage to face next turn if he doesn't. And currently, RDU does not have the tools to be able to do that.
And if those tools are minion-based, if he plays a minion, then that is mirror entity, isn't it, for Seiko? Which means he's going to gain that same minion back.
Right.
Ironbark, though, not too shabby.
Ironbark's insane. And an 8 health dragon to go along with it. I was going to say, right now, his Ironbark... I guess he has the Walking Fountain, actually. If he didn't find a higher health target, he certainly would have just ended up Ironbarking the Walking Fountain. Would have been nutty. Because it means it can't just be Ray of Frosted again. It kind of has to be dealt with. It might still be the target for that reason.
That was exactly my question was going to be. Does he still Ironbark it anyway? Because if it gets traded into at all... Oh, wait, yeah, because it'll resummon the taunt.
Oh, has that not dawned on you up until this point? Like, how insane that combo was.
I thought the game would be over by now, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if the 4-1 hasn't actually died, then it's probably worth Ironbarking something else.
Right.
Oh, that's not going to be it.
That's just one freeze. That's all Seiko has available to him. One minion to freeze, and he can ping the 4-1 if he really wants to. But that means infinity damage left up on board on the other side.
So there's, what, realistically, 24. So it does mean Seiko, 25 with hero power, does mean Seiko has one turn if RDU has no damage from hand.
Yeah, RDU's deck plays damage, though. Most Druids don't, but Mali Druid absolutely does. Lucent Bark Walking Fountain, dude. Like, are you kidding me?
Hey, that's the risk you take when you play devolving missiles.
Mm-hmm.
Your feeble magic
amuses me. And a swipe.
It's just lethal. Don't know how much information RDU has on secrets, ice barrier, things like that, but we know it's lethal.
I think you always attack. He needs to take the chance, right? There's the attack, knows it's not ice barrier. He already knows it's not counterspell, right? He's played a spell.
Yep.
So that should be all that really matters. Swipe's going to get the job done. And that is RDU. Going to be booking his spot in the finals of Week 1 of Grandmasters Season 2 Swiss. And you predicted correctly, at least so far, so we are going to have Flyzer versus RDU in the final. So congratulations to Seiko getting that top 4 finish and banking a good chunk of points for Week 1. But RDU, as I mentioned, all the way at the start on Friday, for RDU to do so well in Week 1 of this season must mean just that little bit more, just to try and like reassert maybe some of the dominance he might have felt he lost in the previous season at least. So great job for RDU on that one. Really close game.
And what that means now is get a grip on something close by and sturdy, because we are about to get a rematch of one of the most hectic Hearthstone series I can remember seeing since the Seat Story final between Casey and Ball Control a couple of years ago. We saw this, RDU vs Blyze, I think it kicked us off on day 2, and they both played at an electric pace between the two of them, and now we go all the way through to the finals on Sunday, and we're going to get the rematch. So this one, even if it's a 5-game series, might be over very quickly. So you've got something to do, make sure you do it now in the short break that we're about to take, because you will end up missing an entire series of Hearthstone if you wait any longer.
Yeah, just to give RDU just a few minutes, of course, just to have a quick breather, maybe grab a drink before he sits down and buckles in for this final. As Sol did mention, we are going to go to a break just to give the players some time, but we're going to be right back with the finals of week 1 here in the European Grandmasters. It's going to be RDU versus Blythe. Make sure you do not miss it.